Welcome to day 3 of SVG Europe FutureSPORT, Contribution and Distribution. I'm Heather McLean, editor at SVG Europe, and I'll be your host for today's show. Once again, on this final day of FutureSPORT, we have an amazing array of speakers for you as we explore where we have been in 2020 and where we're going in 2021 in sports broadcast production. We'll be hearing from all aspects of sports broadcasting today, including manufacturer experts, Premier League Productions, DAZN and Sky Sport Germany. We also have a fantastic keynote coming up from Eurosport's Gordon Castle, who is going to share his thoughts and wisdom with us. But before we begin, I'd like to give a big thank you to our title sponsor, Panasonic, who we will now hear from. Please welcome Oliver Newland, Field Marketing Manager, who is going to give us some updates on the new video processing platform, Kairos. Over to you, Ollie.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us as we kick off the final day of SVG Europe's FutureSPORT event. Over the next few minutes, I'll outline Panasonic's glass-to-glass solution for both video capture and delivery in a little more detail. Panasonic has made a conscious effort to hone its R&D efforts to focus on both innovation and, perhaps most importantly, optimization. Panasonic has been devoted to providing major efficiencies for live production by enhancing the usability of its products, making integration into pre-existing systems easier by supporting the latest IP video protocols in addition to existing baseband infrastructure. A key aspect of smart live production is the notion of Panasonic going beyond the development of simply making great products. It includes a wide product portfolio that work together seamlessly, ranging from PTZ and system cameras to robotic solutions and tracking systems, in addition to projection and professional displays. Enabling smart live production to be a glass-to-glass solution is Kairos, our next-generation IP-based video processing platform. Kairos takes the various components of a live program output and virtualizes them, enabling unprecedented productivity for live production. Kairos is the central part of the live production ecosystem. It is a platform and not a dedicated product or tool, as it can serve many purposes. The first version of Kairos enables usage as both a broadcast and presentation switcher, and many more features will be added along the way. Kairos sits at the center of our glass-to-glass solution and can be used to bring global audiences to the heart of the action. Kairos is ready to be implemented into existing infrastructure whilst ensuring that our customers are also at the forefront of future technology developments thanks to its software-based architecture. The platform also guarantees a latency of just a single frame, a first on the market, which makes it an extremely attractive tool for live production. Kairos allows contribution and distribution feeds to go beyond IP. The traditional approach is to send baseband signals to specialized hardware products, processing these signals using dedicated hardware boards. The current approach is to make the transition from baseband to IP signals. However, dedicated hardware is usually still required, which is costly and brings many limitations. Kairos supports both baseband and IP signals, such as SD2110 or NDI, and at the same time uses IT components and software processing, thus providing a new level of performance that was previously inaccessible. We understand that the move towards a software-based platform isn't necessarily going to happen overnight. Therefore, we have also created a dedicated hardware panel called Kairos Control. An increase in the creation of remote production facilities means that more Kairos creator and Kairos control sites can be added to a network wherever an operator or an engineer needs to be. To help understand what Kairos and our glass-to-glass solution can offer, we made a short explanation video showing how Kairos was used as both a broadcast and presentation switcher when covering an esports event. Kairos also features in our Panasonic Live series, demonstrating our latest developments in video production. Scan the QR code here and watch it for yourself. Thank you for watching, and back to you, Heather.
And we're back. Thank you very much, Ollie. Coming up very soon, we have our vendor perspective session, but right now, let's go to our keynote speaker, Gordon Castle, Senior Vice President for Technology at Eurosport.
Welcome everyone to our live coverage of the US Open here on Eurosport. Mats is joining me, Tim Henman is joining me. How does it feel to be a Grand Slam champion? Boris Becker with me in the cube. Boris?
I don't know right now, really. It's so overwhelming.
Hey, Babsy.
Justine Anna is going to join me right now. Justine, great to see you. What happened today against Nagle? He's way behind the baseline.
You see it, the ball travels in the air and hits the umpire.
Novak Djokovic was just disqualified from the US Open. Naomi Osaka is here with me right now. Naomi, congratulations.
Yeah, first of all, hello. Nice to see you.
Rafa, bienvenido una vez más. A ver cuándo apareces por aquí a nuestro lado.
Here in the cube, Simona. Here we go. You can give it a blow. I'll help you. First time the two of you see each other. How nice is that?
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. I'm going to sleep very well tonight.
Good. I hope you enjoyed our coverage, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Hi, I'm Heather McLean, editor at SVG Europe, and I'm joined today by Gordon Castle, Eurosport's Senior Vice President for Technology. Hi, Gordon.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Great.
Okay, so Eurosport and Discovery have achieved a lot this year. How's the pandemic pushed you to evolve your productions and increase your technical innovations? And how has the Eurosport Cube been part of that?
So, I mean, this has been an amazingly challenging year. We've gone, from a huge sports schedule to no sports schedule to then compressing sports into a small amount of time with a lot of COVID restrictions. The good news is we had a strategy already that was we were moving towards remote production for everything. And COVID has absolutely accelerated that. So, we started out with the idea that remote production separates the crew from the event. And now we're using remote production to separate the crew from each other, and even separate, where we put the different people, the commentators, the talent, and how we connect in the guest. And that's where VR came in. So one of the things we're also proud of is using innovation to tell deeper and richer stories. And so we had the Cube, which was developed and was planned to be launched during the Tokyo Games. And we launched it for the US Open. And the interesting thing there is the Cube is a VR studio, but it's different than a traditional VR studio in that it allows greater degrees of interactivity. So when you're in the Cube, you're actually in the VR environment. You're surrounded, instead of by green walls, you're surrounded by LED screens. And so you're seeing the objects around you that are in the virtual reality environment. And this allows us to do interactivity in a more natural way. So what you see in the clips, for example, is the ability to beam in the guest, beam in the athlete into the studio and bring people from multiple locations. So suddenly, because we were physically, it was impossible to be on site for the US Open, we brought people together from different parts of the world and had them interact in a very natural way. So using technology to actually create a deeper relationship than what we were able to do when we were on site.
Cool. It is really cool. It looks brilliant. And Eurosport has also progressed a major plan this year, your technology transformation project, which you describe as a private cloud for live production. This distributed environment is really relevant right now because of how we've all been forced to work this year. Cube has kind of outlined that and made it even better. So how is this project changing the way you're approaching live productions now, and how is it evolving?
So the project, the other fundamental thing was, one aspect is a remote production for all. In this case, we separated out the technology from the operating spaces. So historically, they were all together. And that meant if you had a lot of locations, you had content all over the place and technical investments in a lot of places. In this transformation project, we create these two tech hubs. And we call these private clouds for live production because they feel like a cloud. They're separated from where the operating spaces are, and they allow all the content to be shared, just like you can get all the access from the cloud today, but you can be anywhere and access that. So it's really changed how we operate. It's allowed for more localized production when we want it, and it's allowed for people to be in different spaces, which has been hugely advantageous, of course, in a COVID situation. So that's even been accelerated. And of course, why we did it is to increase our ability to tell both stories that are available to all of our audiences and stories that are available to specific audience and specifically digital. So really support the rise of our digital products.
And how are you using the cloud for contribution and distribution? And what will this enable you to achieve in the future, particularly in the next 6 months when things are still changing and we're not sure what's happening?
So I think this is an area that's going to change a lot in the future. So today we get a fairly small percentage of our contribution via the cloud. Some of the events that go straight to digital, for example. So we have a partnership with GCN, and they do a lot of events, the Global Cycling Network, directly to digital, and a lot of that contribution is, of course, over digital. All of our digital distribution is on the cloud, right? But increasingly, things that are ending up in linear are also being, the contribution and distribution is over the cloud. And this is an area that where all the major cloud vendors are really investing in it and opening up capabilities to move very high bandwidth, high quality signals to the cloud. And that, combined with live production being able to be possible in the cloud, I think opens up a lot of possibilities for us in the future. So the answer is today it's fairly small. Except for our digital products, which is using the cloud a lot for contribution distribution, but I see that growing dramatically in the near future.
Cool. And what are the challenges that you and the rest of the sports broadcasting industry currently face with regard to connectivity? Because the way everyone's working, connectivity is the key issue. What do you need to keep moving this kind of innovation and ways of working that we've been talking about forward?
Well, the big thing there is we need the vendor community to adopt open standards. Okay, we're successful in a lot of ways of doing this, but we're still using some proprietary equipment. Okay, so Zixi is a great piece of equipment. We use it quite widely, but it still has a proprietary interface, meaning that it's not quite as open to things. And so if we want open to connectivity from different providers in different locations, and there's some physical box aspects here. So I think that we need greater support of open standards for connectivity. We need the ability to do multi streams in the cloud, for example, and we need to focus on security. I think it's when you lease your own fiber lines and lease your own connectivity or own that connectivity, you're in total control. As we move more things to the cloud, as we move more things to being more flexible, we need to really make sure those are secure. And there's then this aspect of last mile resiliency that I think is important as well. So that last mile connectivity, we need to keep the ability for that to be diverse as well.
Cool. Yes. Yeah. And where do you see sports broadcasting going next year in terms of trends and technologies in the face of COVID-based situations?
So, continued rise of remote production. And I think people really, as I said, extending the fact, even as COVID relaxes, we will some things will go back to, people wanting to be together and so forth. But, what you hear people talk a lot about and what we want to embrace is be able to support what is natural and the most effective. So sometimes it's the most effective to have people together, and sometimes it's the most effective to work from your home. Right. So, we want to be able to provide that as a business to our employees and also to our productions, giving people greater flexibility in the way they work together. And that overall will increase quality. So more remote production, but more flexibility even than we even thought about in the past. And then more production in the cloud. So moving more production and increasingly all into the cloud, moving more to software-based video switching, audio mixing, and things like that is certainly an area we're pushing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Gordon.
Great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Gordon Jordan always provides great insight into the sports broadcasting industry and Eurosport, from its innovative cube to the need for greater support for open standards and stronger security so that we can get better connectivity and make better use of the cloud as well. Up next, we have our vendor perspective session. We have brought together a selection of our sponsors over the 3 days of FutureSPORT to bring you insight into how they are thinking and what they're doing in these trade show free times. Without further ado, here is today's expert panel, guided by SVG Editorial Director, Ken Kerschbaumer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next session, looking at contribution and distribution technologies. Obviously, I will be honest, as a sports fan, I want to thank all of the gentlemen on this panel, because clearly without your technologies, there would have been no sports on TV during this pandemic. I think clearly what we've seen is the work that you have all done to build your businesses, and not to build them to help us during a pandemic, has allowed us to really work in new ways and have contribution from new places and have people working from home. So first, thank you all on behalf of sports fans all across the world, and obviously the people who are doing business around the world. And I wanted to start with a quick introduction of everybody, beginning with Chris Clarke, who is the Cerberus Chief Executive. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, Ken. Chris Clarke, like said, CEO and founder of Cerberus Tech. We predominantly provide live services over IP, over open technology, and some proprietary technology stacks, but a migration to the open technology as a direct replacement for satellite or fiber, where it is either too expensive for the customer or just not available because of geographic regions.
Sure, yes. Sure. Excellent. And Pierre-Louis Theron, Lumen VP of Content Delivery Services. How are you, Pierre-Louis?
Very good. Very, very happy to be here today. So part of Lumen previously CenturyLink. We changed our name a few months ago. I'm in charge of the CDN product, so I'll be here to talk about content delivery networks and all the implication around it. And I actually joined Lumen via the acquisition of my company, Streamroot, where I was one of the co-founder and the CEO. Streamroot was in the CDN world as well, working on peer-to-peer technology for CDN. So I have my two hats, but really looking at what we can do in this situation in terms of distribution mostly.
Excellent, great. And Damien Nagle, Net Insight Product Manager. Damien, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Ken. My responsibility at Net Insight is for the Nimbra product range. And we're essentially a solution provider. We provide hardware and software solutions. And I think in line to what Chris and Pierre-Louis have been saying, that we really have seen a very large demand to move to an open type of offering, and something that is allowing service providers to build those services as well. So we're working with a lot of service providers to do that.
Excellent, excellent. And Simon Harrison, you are without a doubt the new member of a company I think I've ever had on a panel in 15 years. We were at M2A Media. Do you even have a title yet at this point?
I do. I have a title and a name. I am a head of product for M2A Media, and I joined M2A yesterday.
There you go.
So yeah,
congratulations.
Thank you very much. So we are M2A provide cloud services to broadcasters and rights holders, built on the backbone of AWS services. We've got some great products serving live. We do routing, cloud routing and distribution and capture and VOD, and I'm just getting my teeth into it now, but it's been one of my sort of an area I've worked in previously at previous companies, and I'm really happy to be here at M2A.
Great. Well, congratulations. Good luck. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. And Daragh Bass, NEP Media Solutions, Head of Sales. Daragh, how are you holding up?
Thanks very much for having me here today, Ken. I look after sales for NEP Media Solutions. I'm very much probably representing the voice of the customer, I suppose, today in this conversation.
Exactly. So let's start with you, actually. You know, obviously, we're all well aware of NEP's role in the industry. You know, how have the contribution and distribution technologies that we're going to discuss today, how have they kind of really helped you guys operate in new ways in this era of COVID-19?
I think it'd be fair to say we've all pivoted quite a lot over the last 6 to 12 months. We had traditionally been delivering all different types of remote production. I suppose, the terms remote and REMI and at home and all these things, kind of what they were pre-COVID to what they are post-COVID, has definitely shifted. And I don't think there's a single noun to kind of describe, all the different ways we work right now. I think probably what's the fairest thing to say is we all need to be very agile, and the solutions that we were deploying in March have changed numerous times and have had multiple iterations to what we're deploying today. I suppose what's been driving our business for a period of time is the move towards more centralized productions. So, increasing utilization by kind of locating core facilities and data centers. So we've traditionally been, leveraging managed connectivity for that over the years. However, a rapid acceleration over the last kind of 6 to 9 months is more adopting more cloud-facing pieces, more of a hybrid cloud approach, but definitely leveraging, public internet backbones and things like that to get signals in and out.
Gotcha. Well, Chris, let's have your perspective, because I think clearly you deal with customers all day, and you're probably hearing the same things that Daragh is saying as far as what they're looking for. What have been your experiences the last 8 months or so?
Yeah, I'll go back very briefly, a little bit longer than from the formation of the company, kind of 7-8 years ago. It's all we've done. We had no reliance on traditional infrastructure, kind of coming at it as a new entity and a new business. And I'm delighted to hear the industry singing from the same hymn sheet that we've been singing from for a few years now, which is the internet as a transmission medium, given the right protection mechanisms and protocols on top, is a perfect medium for transmitting live signals. And the customers, it's delightful to see them really make use of the technologies, find their own feet. There's competing technologies, there's competing protocols out there that are all claiming to be able to do the same thing. And it's useful for them to all go out and explore and find which one fits their business practices, which one fits their workflows, which one fits their cost models and business cases, and kind of settle down into little islands that are connected with some internet thoroughfares, I guess, and that's kind of the future that we want to see is more sharing of their content between the organizations.
Gotcha. Do you find, and this for all of you, please answer this as well, is it challenging because, Daragh, like you said, every show is almost different now for NEP, right? So it's very complicated, like all of the skill sets that Daragh learned out the window, so it's sort of, not all of them, Daragh, but you're always like reinventing yourself, right? Do you find, is it hard, Chris, as far as, do you find that it's almost bespoke and a la carte?
For us, it's something I've been saying for a little while. It was always useful for each of our customers to go and explore how best that they could leverage the technology. As we've been coming at it over the last few years, establishing these relationships with what would be new takers for some of our customers and finding that they didn't have an IP roadmap. They didn't really know which way they were going to go. So it was almost like the tail was wagging the dog in terms of how we were going to deliver the content to them. Whereas the organizations that had thought about it and planned and adopted some kind of infrastructure and go, okay, this is how we are going to interface with the IP world, and they take control of it, those organizations are light years ahead of the other ones. So it's beautiful to behold a conversation which says, okay, we need to deliver an IP service to you, and they say, okay, we've already established a ZXI or a REST or an SRT kind of head end. This is how we would like to take this content in, instead of it being piecemeal and going, oh, okay, can you send us an IP enabled or ZXI enabled decoder or something? And you got all these tiny little islands, whereas actually the technology, if they think about it, they could have a main device and a backup device that is capable of, a gigabit per second on each, if they would just think about it in a strategic fashion instead of just firefighting almost the opportunities that they have in front of them. That's kind of how we feel.
That makes sense. So Damien, from the Insight perspective, obviously you guys had a big product announcement, I guess about a month ago, right? So what are you seeing as far as your clients and what they're looking for and how you guys are adjusting to meet their needs?
So I would say that, I mean, most of our customers are service providers, and most of them are providing services to production companies and broadcasters around the world. And what we've had to do is maybe even harder than delivering the services, because we've had to reorganize our technology, our view about the technology stack in terms of the base products that we're offering, right? And that really has been oriented around giving something that's very, very flexible. So if you're a service provider, and exactly as Chris was saying, you've got someone who says, look, I've got this tech stack ready, can you please come in and interoperate with that? And they've thought about that. But if you've got another customer on the other hand who says, look, I don't know what to choose, or maybe this is interesting or that's interesting, our view about that is not to introduce any limitation, right? So we want to give a powerful generic purpose platform for a service provider to offer, or also for a production company to interoperate on top of a service provider services that are there on the other side. And then we've seen the new normal is that there's kind of an oscillation now. So we work with very high bandwidth networks, wide area networks as well, multiple 100 gigs, as well as 5-10 megabit transport stream type of networks. And we see that these are actually consolidating. These are getting very close to each other, but you will still have very high bandwidth networks, but now they're becoming very, very close to low bandwidth networks. And the type of processing and exchange that you need to do on those edges, we're seeing that that's becoming a new normal now. We're hearing that, okay, I want to go from this uncompressed 2110 over here, 4K. Now I want to send it up to a distribution partner in South Asia. I want to go up into the cloud and distribute that out. So, but these workflows now, they used to be separated maybe by other islands in between. They're meeting each other. And they're saying to us that we want to have the capability to go from one to the next in basically one step. We don't want to go through 2 or 3 steps in between. And either the service provider is on both sides or they're on one side. And we need to be able to allow those workflows to be built. So we've seen the new normal being the expectation that you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to be adaptable today and in the future as well.
Sure. Pierre-Louis, from the Lumen perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very, from distribution perspective, I would say that what's really changed is kind of everything is unpredictable. And when you are in charge of very large architecture and huge networks, this is really why broadcasters or OTT providers are already choosing partners like Lumen, and most of the time are even like choosing to have like a multi-CDN architecture, because you better not rely on only one when you don't know what's going to happen. So it's been a very interesting year. I mean, the overall, we've seen our traffic growing dramatically during that period because obviously a lot of people being home and watching content. Has been putting a lot of pressure on not only the CDN, but we also one of the biggest IP backbone provider, and as well as all the peering point that we have with the ISP across the globe. So definitely something it wasn't because of sport, because for a long time sports wasn't a thing at all, but it was a lot of usage that we also transport in our network around like gaming, VOD content, and live linear TV channel. But now sports is coming back, and I think there's a huge opportunity for all the OTT providers, and a lot of them are our customers, to really grow, because it's the only way for users to kind of engage with their favorite teams and favorite sports, because there's no way of going to the stadium, and probably for another 6 months or so at least. I would say that there's a huge opportunity for acceleration, and they need to, I mean, a little bit like what the other said, like, it's unpredictable, so you need to be adaptive, need to be sure that you can be flexible, moving around traffic on one day and no traffic this other day. And I think it's also an interesting opportunity, because everything is so much disrupted that we see more and more people, broadcasters that have like getting the rights for sports events only for OTT, that is not even available for like traditional broadcast or ISP. And this is not something we were seeing. I mean, it was very rare like 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's becoming more and more normal. And I think that the fact of staying home is gonna accelerate the things, and we're gonna see it more and more. So huge opportunity on the distribution side of things, and need to really help these people that now can buy rights in any place of the world, and the day after say, hey, in Vietnam I need to deliver like a boxing game in Vietnam in 3 weeks. How can you help me with that? And I think, again, because everything is moving online, everything is home, this is something that is accelerating that trend. It was already a trend. It's not the current situation, but it's accelerating this.
Sure, great, excellent. So Simon, obviously I'm not going to put you on the spot about your experience at M2A for the last 6 months and 7 months, but obviously you have been, let's just say, a figure in the industry. You've been tracking what's been going on. So what's been your take of the last 6 or 7 months?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, it's been a challenging period. We can call it interesting, but none of us would have wished this upon ourselves. Yes. But I think it's really important, that we look back at and we can see, hopefully look back and see what we can learn from this from this period. In my view, the new normal has been one of those phrases kind of overused during this whole sort of COVID period, and I think it's got in there somewhere is this idea that we just sort of passively accept whatever happens to us. But we absolutely shouldn't. There's plenty to learn from here. We've got to have a look at, admit there's some necessarily evils in there in the kind of world of sport. What have we seen? We've seen empty stadiums. We've seen fake crowd noises, but we've seen a lot of great stuff too. We've seen, if not acceleration of technology trends, we've certainly seen a lot of, things proven. Remote production has been proven for a while, and as sport has come back, we've been able to say, look, these are the benefits. This is why we were doing everything. Flexible resource provision. Again, cloud provision of these services have been around for a long time, and they've really come into their own during this period. So, during that summer slump, in which a lot of the sporting schedules were emptied, there were things still going on. The companies who had, that flexible backbone could reduce the services they were doing. And interesting, Pierre-Louis, you raised the working from home, because there were darts players working from home over the summer. Let's not forget them. And all of a sudden, contribution was a home internet connection. It moved from something just used to consume media to some, your main contribution point for a big sport. So, there is a lot to take from this, but I think it's up to us, to take out the positives, really concentrate on those and go, let's carry on doing this in the future. Let's carry on. Remote production, great. Flexible, cost-effective means of production, getting more stuff out there, absolutely great. Fake crowd noises, let's ditch that as soon as we can, please, and get people back in the stadiums.
Sure. So Daragh, I wanted to turn it over to you, because I think you had a couple of topics you wanted to discuss. I guess top of mind for you was the whole proprietary systems versus open standards. So you want to talk about that a little bit from your perspective, then throw it out to the posse?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose just even picking up on what the gents have all been saying previously, I think one of the key things, for me as well over the last number of months has been, when we talk connectivity, traditionally we would have predominantly been envisaging content distribution, so main program feed outbound to multiple takers. And what we've seen is the majority of our conversations are content contribution. So it's flipped. It's how do we get high volumes of sources back to a central place to allow for remote production. You mentioned the darts, for example, or, I know we did a horse racing thing during the summer and we had 11 different contribution points, in one production, and that also goes beyond people who are just in vision. It also starts now move to, control data, multi-viewer distributions, getting really high volumes, so how can we use the web and web-based tools to kind of get, interaction with like entire production teams for logging and all these types of things. So that's kind of what tees up my first question to the group. And what we've seen is traditionally, you know, when we talked about the traditional model, it can work within kind of, you know, closed standards, single ecosystem from a set supplier. But as we move to this environment where we need to have so many different touch points, there's a growing demand for interoperable standards, and kind of less of a, you know, a particular lock-in with any one vendor. And the idea that we can kind of open it out and we can interact with kind of cloud providers, on-prem facilities, existing hardware manufacturers, and so on and so forth. So I'm quite keen to hear kind of what the panel's thoughts are on that, you know, and future direction.
Well, Chris, you aren't muted, so you get the short straw. So Chris, you're up first.
Am I muted?
No, you're not
muted.
You are muted.
Not now.
Yeah.
So in terms of keeping everything interoperable is something that, from our perspective, we've been a big utilizer, I should say, of ZXI technology for delivery over open networks for a long, long time. But we see hot on its heels are technologies like SRT and RIST, and as adoption goes around the world, what we found it's been keen for us to do is to not set a menu out in front of people, but let them use whatever they have available. So we've set our whole business around being an interoperable switch. So regardless of what type of technology you have, was then being able to turn it into the right profile, the right format at the right rate, so that the destination could accept it as it was. A case in point would have been delivering some Premier League football to a number of takers who all wanted a really high contribution rate. So they wanted, I say really high in terms of compressed TS, but they wanted a 35 megabit per second transport stream. But it was actually going up on a 9 megahertz satellite transponder in the US, in which case they couldn't take the 30 megabits per second version. So it's just trying to then provide a service that could be everything to everyone. So having a normalized transcode profile that was set by the destination taker to 8.44 megabits per second, I think it was, sorry, to go up on their 9 meg transponder in the US. And it gave everybody what they were looking for. In terms of not saying anything, it's not really something that we've been part of these kind of closed ecosystems as such to provide the proprietary benefits that would come from something like that in a remote production. We've always tried to be a anything goes house, I think, but trying to be, what's the right phrasing, the right shaped jigsaw piece puzzle to fit that middle distribution or contribution angle. Having the right interface at the ingest and the right interface at the egress, and trying to be the bit in the middle is kind of where we've been.
Gotcha, excellent. So Damien, what's your take from that insight perspective on open standards, proprietary, APIs, all that good stuff?
So, I mean, this fits pretty well in with what we were talking about before, from like this need on the vendor side to re-architect what the product could do in the future without knowing what the future looks like. So we've gone from a situation where we had, you know, there would be like a very long time of like standardization, and, you know, you would wait until the standard was like, you know, kind of ready, and then you would work with implementing that in your product. Now the product needs to be able to be ahead of the standard and needs to be able to adopt the standard if the standard becomes the one that's to be selected, right? So with the pace of innovation increasing like dramatically, like, I mean, I think Chris said, you know, there's like ZXI, SRT, and RIST. We support all three in our platform, both in our cloud distribution platform, but also in our hardware processing platforms. And like we don't advise any one or the other, right? It's not interesting for us to advise. It's like, okay, well, you have something else over here. SRT Hub is what you use. That's good. But in terms of how the hardware is architected, what we're trying to do is to make something that's adaptable from a cost perspective, but also powerful from an application execution perspective, and then make that programmable, right? Because if you're a service provider, you will want to be able to have a way to orchestrate an infrastructure that is not yet defined. And I think that that's something that means that the type of, let's say, customer experiences you can offer on top of that will be different. So if you look at one of the trends, like, because we worked with remote production, I think the first remote production project I worked on was 2008. And then we saw this trend to introduce customer provisioned remote production, or this was one type of case for that. And that essentially meant that the customer themselves ordered all the services that they needed, and they could order it according to a template. And exactly as Daragh is saying, data services back then, that was super exotic, that you would combine, your data services for the control traffic. But now you've got RTMP traffic, you've got HLS streams coming through there, you've got a general services pipe, right? But people are expecting that to be part of the infrastructure, the standard services. So the next layer from like our product perspective is, how do you automate that? How do you build it and make that automatable? That's by others, either by a service provider or the end user of the service provider. So I think that the question about standards is, of course, we should work interoperable. There's no doubt about that. We make much more things that are much better, more quickly by working interoperable. There shouldn't be any vested interest on that. But you need to have a starting point where you can quickly adapt the standards, and that's something that's been harder to do before the cloud era, before the COTS era, and before other things as well too. So I would say the future looks really good when in the next few years, especially, and COVID has accelerated that.
Pierre-Louis, from your perspective on standards and interoperability and.
Yeah, I mean, on the contribution standpoint, I mean, obviously we have our Vivix product, which is kind of a large IP network and fiber that we use for the contribution, and we've been working on leveraging all the standard in the market and trying to follow the trend. It's always hard to keep up with all the standard, and as a networking provider on the CDN side of things, I'd say that we've seen a lot of like protocols arriving on the market, especially regarding low latency. There's been something that we've seen a lot of proprietary ones, some open source initiative like CMAF. Obviously Apple with HLS came up with their own thing with low latency HLS, and we've seen WebRTC low latency. So really from that point of view, I think one of the things that's been slowing down the adoption of low latency is the lack of agreement regarding what is the right standard to use, because CDNs just has not implemented any or very little support of this low latency protocol. So it's nice to do it on the origin, or do it on your packaging or encoder, but if no CDN is supporting it, then it's a problem. So I would say that we're really looking at this at the market to kind of agree around 1 or 2 or 3 standards, the same way it happened about supporting like either HLS, smooth streaming, HDS, or whatever. We're really looking at following the trend, seeing what's the market is really adopting, what is really deployed, and supports the ones. But everything which is proprietary, when you have a network at the scale that we have with thousands of servers across the globe and hundreds of points of presence, it's not possible for us to just implement any support. So I think it's very, very important that, and I think over the years we made a lot of progress. I mean, we're going definitely in the right direction. When I started in the industry a few years ago now, it was much more the wild west than it is today. But there's still a lot of work to do to go around like agreement, especially when you see new standards coming up like around low latency. I would say that's
sure. Simon, what's your take on? You've been on both sides of the fence now, I guess. So what's your take on as far as this whole standards issue and interoperability and openness?
Yeah. Look, now on the service provider side of the fence, absolutely, as all the guys have said there, it's all about keeping up. It's all about having SRT, ZXE, RIST, and even RTMP in your tool set. But I do actually think there is a role for us, working with broadcasters and with content suppliers and rights holders to sort of perhaps steer them away from some things, and steer them towards protocols which have a little bit more protection or a little bit more advanced. I get a sense that RTMP is the first thing on the drop down, and it's a lot of things that some of the smaller, the sort of the niche providers select, thinking, oh great, this is it, I've reached the future. I think it's for us to kind of to guide them slightly. There is a difference, these things, in terms of interoperability, in terms of signal stream security. We perhaps should be looking at some types of protocols rather than others, but sorry to take it back and make it perhaps a bit clunky. I think one of the most important things, having worked sort of both sides of the fence, and I think it's the next big challenge, isn't just the protocols, but it's basically it's cloud contribution, how these people are contributing to the clouds, because not all methods are equal. Some of the big providers have big dedicated direct connects. Some have big beefy internet connections. Some are going over the corporate network to connect to the internet. Some, as we've seen with the darts again, some of the players just didn't have the connectivity, to get their signals out. And I think we have a role as consumers. We've all looked at our internet connections over this period and gone, crikey, is this going to last? And I think we have a role to say, there's so much more you can do. Once you get your signal to the cloud in terms of transformation and distribution, and a lot of those things are proven. The next thing I think we have to help people crack is getting it there. Because at the moment it's a bit of a rag bag, and I think we can help people sort out what's best for them, what's best for their companies.
Sure, great, excellent. Daragh, any thoughts on, you've taken a lot of information, Daragh. What's your thought?
Yeah, no, I was just going to follow up. I think that's a really good point. I think we're seeing more and more scenarios of multiple suppliers being involved in the content delivery chain. And I think, that orchestration point that Damien touched on and then Simon touched on there as well, it's, how do we orchestrate that content journey? How do we manage it? How do we monitor it? We're going to have scenarios where we work as multiple suppliers. As NEP, we need to work alongside other suppliers to hand signals off to and from. With this drive for ultra low latency, multiple encode decodes along the way just for the sake of a very clean demarcation point isn't going to work anymore. So, that's probably for me nearly more challenging than an interoperable standard. We look to you guys as kind of manufacturers, and as service providers, okay, right, we support RIST or we support SRT. Yes, we can do forward error correction, we can do -7 protection. Those sort of things are more kind of technical, and the engineering boffins can figure them out. But actually, on an operational level, quite often it's nearly more challenging. It's finding the right kind of single pane of glass as such to monitor your entire content workflow. And I think we're going to have to probably get to the point where we have, it might even be another layer that sits on top, that is a control and monitoring solution that will monitor it as it passes through some net insight kit into something else across a transit gateway belonging to AWS, handing back through, M2A Connect, platform and out the other side, and it's how do you monitor that entire content workflow and share content collaboratively? I think that's the other big piece that, it's funny, we still use satellite so much for content distribution because it's easy. We send it up once, we send out an email with, here's your BIS key and here's your satellite details, and we download it or downlink it in multiple places. But we need to kind of get to the point where we have that same ease of sharing, but using IP connectivity. I think the other big piece for me is I hear terms like, IP transit gateways and cloud almost used interoperably, excuse me, that, or interchangeably. And I think there's a big difference, between managed connectivity and first mile and last mile connectivity, and then using kind of internet backbones. However, I think the guys touched on it earlier on when they said, we've got, there's scenarios where there's, 10 gig pipes, but then there's also standard scenarios where you've got somebody sitting on a 50 meg download connection, maybe 10 meg up. And we kind of, again, want that single pane of glass, same tool set to kind of manage the signal flow. I don't have the answers, but again, I'd be quite keen to hear what the panel's thoughts are, in that area, you know.
All right, Chris, you're up again first. I'm going to do the same rotation. Chris, what's your any thought? Yeah, I mean, look, this is the billion-dollar question, right? I guess.
Yeah, no. So I mean, to be honest with you, Daragh, we agree. It's what we've been trying to create for a long time now. Was the single pane of glass look for a content owner to be able to deliver to all of their rights takers around the world, regardless of what delivery format was, regardless of where they were in the world, regardless of what their transcode or encoding profile was, regardless of their budget. Oftentimes we get involved with, I guess, lower tiered sports than some of the big guys, and they're out there on a sales mission to try and grow their viewership around the world. And too often, the technical delivery response is always going to be, oh, it's available at BT Tower, or it's available on this European uplink. You're like, great, but I'm trying to sell it to an OTT in Vietnam. So how do they go about getting it in a cost-effective manner that doesn't, completely obliterate the commercial cost that they paid for the content in the first place? So that's what we tried to find. The cloud is a great, cloud, here we go again, the transit gateway, the whatever you want to call it, is a great delivery means for getting this content to them in a cost-effective manner. But how do you suddenly, instead of just putting it up on satellite and sending out an email to, let's even say 100 different organizations, you're now managing 100 IP connections instead of just delivering it once. So how do you do that? And there has to be then a centralized platform that you can see all of those destinations, that no one organization is responsible for all 100 connections. Why not make each individual affiliate responsible for their egress from that cloud platform, where they can control the config of it? If it's an RTMP destination into an OTT ingest point, then let them set their own criteria for that output. If it's a RIST connection out into a data center somewhere, let them be responsible for it, but have some control over the commercial rights of the content, who gets to see it, who gets to route it into their own organization, and try and separate out those two routines. Because we found that very early on, even delivering to 20 people, we found that it was made up of ZXE, RIST, SRT, RTMP, and HLS at 3 different bit rates to 20 different destinations around the world. And the poor engineer sitting there with a massive headache and a huge bottle of water and some painkillers going, what on earth is going on? But you want to try and hit these. I've got a customer who, it's linear distribution, but they have 6,000 endpoints in a satellite footprint. Like, how do you even begin to tackle that on IP? But we should be able to if we build the right tool sets and orchestrate it in the right fashion.
Oh, great. That's perfect. Damien, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is what Daragh was talking about, being able to have this single point of glass. I mean, because we work so closely with service providers. I mean, I have projects in the morning where we're talking about JPEG XS 8K, right? And then one part of that workflow is going into the cloud. It's like, really? Okay, it's going into the cloud. So we have to figure out how can we get that in there. And this whole question about the monitoring, this is so important, right? Because there's no standards in this area to monitor content as it goes through all of this journey, right? Because you've got a super slow motion camera in 4K, for example, that's 36 to 40 gigabits per second raw data. That needs to get into a cloud workflow for distribution, but also for live production, proxy-based live production. And then it has to get out into the production, the regular high quality production network for remote production. And then it has to get out to the distribution partners. But what we're seeing, and what I was describing earlier on, is that you have this consolidation, this collapse of the distribution and the contribution workflows at the point where they meet. Because they meet in the type of solutions we're providing, we're seeing that even the cloud interfaces are getting in there as well. And if you think about what it means, that you have to be able to monitor on top of this layer, but you also need to be able to do it between the vendors, right? So we get something from one type of camera, or we go into another type of cloud service. We need to be able to work in our own little silos in a way so that what we report upwards. And I think the answer to Dara's question is that you're probably going to look at some of the strategies that other service providers have looked at, which is bringing in your own software engineers and then start asking vendors or other service provider partners that you work with to build a framework of reporting and programmability that you can use, right? Because you're never going to get exactly what it is that you want that's going to differentiate your service, but you will get the ingredients that you can put in your own pot. And I think that as long as people agree to work in the same way, whether that's with REST APIs and you write your APIs in a certain way, I think that that's going to make life a lot easier. But there's definitely really important glue parts in there, as Daragh have been saying, that being able to monitor throughout all these different formats, codec formats, IP, cloud-based, streaming-based. That's you're going to be able to need to be able to follow that journey and be able to assure the end user that they are getting what they're paying for and what they're trying to build in their workflows.
That's great, excellent. Pierre-Louis, from your perspective, the journey.
Well, from our side, I mean, we basically are the network in the middle of all of this. You have cloud, you have the satellite downlink areas, you have like the dedicated fiber if you want to move around some traffic between areas, or using just our backbone, or then what is the ISP peering connection. So for us is getting, as it's getting more complex, because you're not only using like the point where you add the content, you want to move it to another place, which is like fairly straightforward. Now you have like multiple workflows that you need to keep up with. So having the best cloud connectivity, the best backbone, or like dedicated fiber, and as well, it's really important to have then like the best peering connection to make sure that you can deliver that content through the ISP. I think this is really where we've been working on keeping up with all of that is changing. I mean, cloud connectivity has been something we invested quite a bit. We probably have one of the largest connection with all the AWS, Google, and Azure data centers to make sure that we are well connected to them. So from your location, you can go into there and then move to another location. So it's really something that we've been working closely with our customers to leverage our network. So yeah, I mean, more complexity and different networks. This is the world we're living in, but this is where I think we also differentiate as one of the largest backbone company in the world.
Excellent, great, thanks. Well, Simon, I'm gonna have you close this out. So I know obviously, again, in your previous life, I think you're pretty well thrown into the middle of this whole mix of production challenges and getting content from point A to point B and a million points beyond that. What's your take on the journey, being the challenge of interoperability and, just having really, I guess, simple flow from content from venue out to who knows where it's going to go?
Well, I'm optimistic. I think we're well on the way. Yeah, M2A has its M2A Connect product, which is looking to solve the complex entitlement and delivery to various endpoints that Chris described there. But in terms of, and also just to pick up something Damien said there about compressing the workflow, bringing the contribution point that much closer to the actual distribution point. We're getting there. We're so much, to adopt sort of cloud IP workflows for your contribution and your distribution is, the future will be to get away from those conversations, chains involving 5 people, where you phone up the aggregator, who phones up the SAT truck, finding out, 10 minutes down the line that someone's signal amplifier is on fire, and that's why the signal is breaking up, and there's nothing you can do about it. What we're going to be looking at is I think the challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be getting to that first point, that first contribution to cloud point. That's going to be the challenge for a time. But once you have it in that managed environment, that for me anyway, is, I think, Dara's single point of glass. Once we, because we've already sort of cracked the CDN view from the cloud. And if I may, sorry, you asked me to finish it off. What I wanted to pick up on, if I might, was the fact that Dara's comment about low latency and encodes and decodes was actually the point where you had all the heads here nodding. In terms of how we get to the kind of the next world. It's all about, at the moment, we're all fudging. A lot of people are fudging interoperability by breaking out to baseband, whenever they can. That's what's going to bring down latency. That's what's going to crack the interoperability, and that's what's going to enable us to kind of move to this more flexible, scalable world.
Excellent. No, that's great. And you use the word future in your answer, which is great because this is the FutureSPORT event. So kudos.
I aim to please.
There you go. So hopefully we will get together next year because we got these vaccines coming. So we're all a little more optimistic with everything, right? So we can meet in person next year and discuss this next November or December. I believe it'll be December in London, hopefully with a little bit of luck. So gentlemen, thank you so much. Daragh, thank you for co-hosting.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Ken.
And stay safe, everybody. And thanks again so much.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Cheers.
very much.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to all the speakers on that panel. It was interesting hearing about the ins and outs of the orchestration of the content journey, and it will be exciting to see how innovations from our sponsors help that story move along in 2021. Now let's go to Limelight's Charlie Kraus discussing real-time streaming.
Hi, this is Charlie Kraus from Limelight Networks. Today I'm going to talk to you briefly about Limelight real-time streaming, a solution for ultra-low latency streaming delivery with interactivity. So let's first take a look at some of the key problems with online streaming today. One is the common formats that we use provide quite a bit of latency, and that's one of the biggest complaints from live audiences. And more serious than that, it's actually a block to innovation in the way live video streams are delivered. By not having really fast latency, it prohibits certain use cases and adding interactivity to it. So lack of interactivity is a problem because it just means that you can't have things like data sharing and chat among different viewers watching a particular device. And another thing that's the problem is most solutions today don't scale globally. And as we know, most live events are really on a global scale. So Limelight Streaming has been built to solve these problems. It's built very robustly. We have redundant ingest. We have redundancy in the network. It scales globally by putting WebRTC POPs in our global network everywhere. It has adaptive bitrate support for the best picture quality for a given connection. And again, it has integrated security capabilities and more about interactivity. So the key capabilities that we've built in, again, is not only the scale of covering global, but the terms of the number of streams. So it scales to hundreds of thousands of streams, which supports live events. Good picture quality up to ultra high definition support, multiple ingest types, so you can ingest RTMP or WebRTC. And again, I mentioned adaptive bitrate for the best picture quality. And the shared objects. So shared objects is what allows both data to be shared with the audience or chat amongst the audience members. And what this gives us is basically brand new business models that can be coming about. Some of the early ones that we're seeing is, that are similar. It's like auctions and events or online casinos where remote people can use the data interactivity to bid on items or to do wagering in casinos, take a card, put in a bet. Inline sports betting is becoming very, very popular now, where it's legal, where during a live match, you are offered different bets about what may happen on the live action, and you can bet on that. Gaming and esports, where you can participate remotely in terms of commentary and so forth. These are just a few of the use cases that we're seeing right now, and we expect over the next year or so to see quite a bit more of this. Just real quick housekeeping here. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the on-demand recording of this presentation. Please feel free to share with your colleagues. And now I'm going to go over to a very short video about real-time streaming.
People everywhere are watching online video to get in on the action for live sports, gaming, auctions, and the list goes on. But latency can be a big turnoff. Limelight's real-time streaming makes the delay go away. It delivers video streams in less than a second and brings interactivity to live events. The difference? Live streaming will become a more social experience. The result? New innovations in live streaming use cases. Real-time streaming also integrates real-time data, which opens up a world of possibilities for how viewers interact with each other and with content distributors. Because it's based on industry-standard WebRTC technology, real-time streaming is supported natively on all major browsers, and it leverages Limelight's global CDN for unmatched scale, reach, and reliability. Sub-second video delivery, data sharing, high quality. It's a winning combination for viewers, and it can create new business opportunities as well. Learn more on how Limelight can meet your real-time streaming requirements at limelight.com/realtime streaming.
A big thank you to Limelight for that. Next up, we have our final live panel session of this splendid 3-day event, chaired by my colleague, Will Strauss. This panel is going to explore sports broadcasting in 2021. So let's get our panelists in. Over to you, Will.
Thanks, Heather. Welcome to the final session of day 3 of FutureSPORT 2020. My name is indeed Will Strauss, and I am an editor here at SVG Europe. To continue the conversation about contribution and distribution, we've assembled a crack team, what we'd like to call end users. Joining me are Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor is Vice President of Broadcast Operations at the now global live and on-demand sports streaming service DAZN. Louisa von Lenthe. Louisa is the Head of Playout Services for Sky Sport in Germany. And Lowri Davies, who is Head of Broadcast Services at Premier League Productions, which is part of IMG. Welcome to you all. Before we get into the main body of questions, I just want to look back at the other topic, a couple of other topics that we've discussed so far today already. Nick, if I can start with you first, perhaps. Gordon Castle highlighted the need for the vendor community to adopt open connectivity standards, and this was a theme that was continued in the vendor panel too. It might seem like a pretty obvious question, but why do you think this is so important? And perhaps more pertinently, why is that interoperability so important right now?
I think so, and I think you know, we're seeing the emergence of those sort of cloud services and cloud delivery for sports events and events in general over the internet, but everyone has their own flavor of protocol or the way it's delivered and requiring proprietary kit. So I think at the moment, you know, it becomes a bit of a barrier for broadcasters to, you know, decide how are they going to go, you know, what type of streaming, you know, contribution do they want to take. And I think if I take it back to the early days of MPEG, they had the same challenges. It was like, you know, trying to match up someone's encoder to someone's decoder, and you know, which one are you going out with in your truck to make sure that, you know, you can then service whichever client you're sending that to. And I think it's something that was repeated time and again in the panels we've just seen, that, you know, without those interoperability questions being solved, it's really a barrier to, you know, the sort of wide uptake of those services. And I think the other thing I probably want to say about it is, you know, with satellite, there's this global network of sort of professional services companies delivering, you know, from the venue to the broadcaster, and you know, every got, you know, MCRs monitoring all of those services as they transit through that route. And I think you know, it probably needs a similar type of capability within those service providers, not necessarily, let's say, to place these sort of different technical teams across the route, but the ability to drill into that delivery mechanism through, from stadium all the way through to the endpoint delivery, to be able to fault find and make sure that there's an end-to-end quality of service delivered. Because the last thing anyone wants to do is to sign up to a service which falls off air after 15 or 20 minutes, and then your viewer is left wondering what's going on. So I think there are plenty of of challenges ahead. I think a couple of people mentioned the idea of I think Daragh from NEP mentioned this sort of single pane of glass approach, which I quite liked the idea of, to say, okay, you've got this this complete interface where you can see what's going on through the network. And I think that's obviously a concept, but good way to go.
Thank you very much. Lowri, generally speaking, using the public internet and the public cloud for contribution distribution of live sports is a fairly thorny issue. At PLP, do you use it? And if so, where and how? And if not, why not?
So we do use it. We use it as a backup service to our channel, which is ultimately a 24 service we deliver, with the main feed being on satellite. And I guess we saw it as a low risk kind of opportunity to evaluate the technology and the platform. And commercially, it made sense. We had less broadcasters accessing the service compared to our sort of our live matches. But I guess for me, fundamentally, I still think that satellite is the most efficient way of distributing content to large scale number of broadcasters. It's well for a number of reasons. I think there's one cost to distribute. So you can put you put the feed up on satellite, and irrespective as to whether you have 30 broadcasters accessing or 5, that cost remains the same. Also, the kind of beauty of it is that you can hit sort of all 4 corners of the globe using 3 satellites, basically. And also you've got that sort of flexibility that if you've got any last minute sort of takers of a feed, that they can access at the 11th hour without it being sort of overly complicated, given that they're accustomed to accessing satellites generally. I think also importantly, the management side of it, there's something quite comforting in having a sort of tangible signal in return. So you can quite easily sort of troubleshoot and identify if it is a local issue to a broadcaster, or if there's a sort of wider issue across the platform. So I guess to summarize, I'm not saying that sort of IP based public internet solutions won't play a more prominent role in the future, but I think for now, for tier 1 sports, satellite is very much the sort of platform that that's tried and tested, and that we will use. But equally, I do think that there is an opportunity for the kind of IP based to maybe complement, if you're delivering sort of less time critical content, and also some supplementary content. I do think there's a potential for use of that platform.
Thank you. That's great. We'll come back to the satellite question in a few questions' time. Just one more thing on this public internet. Chris Clarke earlier said the public internet was perfect for transmitting live signals, but he caveated that with the right tools and protocols. I'm wondering, Nick, what you think that means potentially.
Yeah, I think the right tools and protocols. We're used to having very, very solid delivery of video content, and I think that's a definite requirement for every broadcaster. And what we've seen over the last, let's say, 10 years with services running over the internet is that there's maybe not so much of a take up to the forward error corrections that you've seen on satellite, and I think that's now emerging with some of these new technologies that were discussed around the Zixi product and things like that, where you see that there's actually inbuilt, capability for error correction across those networks. Because what we know about the internet is, it's especially when it's the public internet, it's not a solid quality of service that everyone is receiving. You're receiving, a contended service with multiple users across it. And, to achieve your quality of service, you need the tools and protocols to deliver that. But I think one of the things that we've seen during 2020 is, we've developed these virtual production environments, which are running over internet connectivity in some cases where, we're able to then, deliver quality of service and, not the lowest of latency. Let's be clear, there is a trade-off between quality and latency when you're running over those type of networks. But we've been able to deliver during a pretty heavy lockdown, live commentary from someone's front room rather than a commentator in the stadium. So, I think that there are massive benefits for having that, integration with the public internet that you could never achieve with, dedicated networks.
Thanks very much. Let's move on and bring in Louisa, who's been here so long the lights have gone off in her office. What's 2020 taught us about contribution and distribution that we can take forward into 2021 and beyond, do you think?
I think if I look back on 2020, I would say we've gone through 3 phases, or more or less stuck in the 3rd one now. But we started obviously off with the close down or the lockdown in Germany, and we kind of had to react and adapt. And our main goal was to keep our 5 24/7 live channels on air no matter what happened. One of them being a news channel, so actually being quite important during that phase. So within 2 weeks, we had to rearrange from being an on-prem focused broadcasting center to entirely remote working, finding hybrid solutions, and making sure that everyone stays safe at the same time. So we managed to set everything up so we could even be able to remote control our broadcasting center. The second phase was kind of the restart of the Bundesliga, which again, in contribution and distribution terms, was a very special situation for us, because the Bundesliga obviously went first as a major league in the Western Hemisphere. So there were high expectations from all sides, and definitely a huge pressure on our platforms to be stable and to be able to broadcast and deliver our content. And I think the third phase we're kind of in now, where we're adapting to a new normal, adjusting broadcasting timetables every 5 minutes, it seems, still being in travel bans, having to make sure that people sit apart from each other. So I would say in terms of the contribution topic, we've learned that we need much easier access to the systems. There will be a huge movement towards more baseband and public internet. Obviously, what Nick said before, definitely the solid delivery of the services is the big topic, the latency, but also the IT security, I think. So we were able to get remote access within 2 weeks, but I think there will be a lot of work on making everything secure if this has to stay up for months and years to come, maybe.
Thanks very much. Another thing that's very relevant to you and to Sky Sport in Germany is the recent introduction of next generation viewing. So HDR is now a regular output for the Bundesliga, and obviously you've got Ultra HD as well. How does that impact on the contribution distribution side of things, and what problems, if any, still need to be solved?
Well, of course, with every new innovation, there are obviously a few challenges connected. We are the first ones in the German market. We started broadcasting UHD HDR matches in the Bundesliga, 2 matches actually per weekend, on one Saturday afternoon match and the evening match on Saturday, and a second division match, but that's UHD HDR. We are broadcasting that with a 12 gig uncompressed fiber directly connected to our broadcasting center, doing it in live production all the time. So the challenges we have with that is, of course, adapting to the new, I think. This is not as the claim for 2020. We're in the learning phase with the OB vans. We will definitely have storage capacity discussions if we want to broadcast more in HDR. But for now, we're actually experiencing that it's been taken in quite well, and our customers enjoy watching it.
Excellent. Lowri, I know that PLP is not necessarily doing HDR, but you do move around UHD signals, you handle them, you take them in, etc. How's the process, how could the process of the workflow be improved, do you think?
I think with, you know, UHD, we've been sort of distributing that since, what, 2016. So I think that sort of workflow and process, with, you know, it's pretty well accustomed to how that all works. I think that the challenge for us, you know, for example, when HDR, or when we decide to broadcast HDR, which is ultimately, which will ultimately be when we, you know, have demand from our international, from the Premier League's international broadcast partners to implement that innovation, and I guess to try and sort of consolidate all of the feeds down, so we're not delivering a sort of, you know, a HD feed, you know, a UHD feed, SDR, a UHD feed, HDR, you know, potential HD, HDR. So, you know, not necessarily from just a cost perspective, but also from a logistical perspective, and having the availability of capacity, you know, at peak times to deliver all those feeds. So I think the sort of emphasis is on the, you know, manufacturers to develop software whereby, you know, you can deliver one feed and, you know, that can be down converted to, I guess, whatever flavor the broadcasters, you know, require. Because, you know, at PLP, the big challenge is it's international. So you've got to sort of, I guess, cater for, you know, the very sort of kind of sophisticated HDR, UHD, etc., down to, you know, those who are broadcasting, you know, at sort of lower bit rates, etc. So, so yeah, a challenge we look forward to hopefully trying to solve.
Absolutely, and a nice call to arms to our suppliers and vendors out there. Hope you made notes on that. Let's change the subject again. Nick, what are the systems or applications, maybe tools or methodologies might we need to, or will need to come to the fore as we go forward into 2021, and why?
I think a lot of these emerging, you know, solutions, let's say, usually come with, you know, some drawbacks. And, you know, I think, you know, Lowri has said that, you know, that the PLP, you know, they sort of stick to what the wide sort of global, you know, audience of broadcasters are used to, because, you know, that's what works in most scenarios. And I think when individual broadcasters go out and look at other solutions, I think they've got to match up. And often, you know, you get an advantage. You know, I talked earlier about, you know, the sort of virtual production environment that DAZN operates, which has been incredibly successful for us, and has allowed us to do many things in 2020 that we wouldn't have been able to do. I think they also come with certain, you know, let's say, challenges around latency, and how can vendors really, you know, crack that nut, because, you know, what we're all trying to do is to, you know, get that sort of glass to glass, you know, from the camera in the stadium to the screen in someone's front room, and to keep that latency to an absolute minimum. And I think that, you know, in some cases we're getting flexibility, but it's at a cost, and I think those costs need to be reduced down to the absolute minimum if we're going to see wide take up. So I think those vendors really need to be focused on quality of service, reducing latency, and those are those two things which always, you know, always are a trade-off. And I think that's going to be a theme in 2021, to try and, you know, really close that gap down, and make these products really take off in terms of wide, you know, uptake across, you know, a wide range of sports.
Thank you very, very much indeed. While we're on a similar subject, Nick, your remote production. How do you see remote production moving into 2021? Are we going to see? I presume we're going to see more of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're, you know, we've rolled it out into a few, rolling it out to more. So it's definitely the way, you know, the way to go. I think, it was Daragh NEP said a few times, we're going to sweat those, those assets and make sure that, we get best bang for our buck out of them. And I think that, is certainly something that we see as our future, being able to hub things centrally and being able to link them, to, different regional outlets or different regional DAZN companies to, to really refine their production, to give them flexibility in their production, and that sort of mobility as well. So, we definitely expect to see more of that in 2021.
Thanks very much. Before we're going to end the session with predictions from all three of our panelists, but before we do that, I always like to ask about the fibre versus satellite question. And Lowri, you're primed for this already. If it isn't already, there'll be pretty much dedicated fibre to most football grounds in certainly the Premier League, Championship, and most courses and arenas around Europe at some stage soon. But will satellite always have a role to play, and if so, where?
Yeah, I think satellite will. I think going back to fibre versus satellite, I guess it comes down to what problem you're trying to solve. And if you look at our sort of our stadium network, we will be bringing back at large busy matches, up to 30 feeds from a single stadium, and then the concurrency with other matches happening, that could be sort of 100 circuits into our facility, all at sort of uncompressed HD as well as some UHD feed. So the practicalities of that being delivered on satellite, forget the commercials, but even if you were looking at a sort of a 9 meg slot for each of those feeds, it's 800 megahertz plus. There just isn't that availability. Plus the quality isn't comparable. So I think fibre absolutely, from a contribution perspective for certain sports, certain applications. But going back to my sort of, I guess my point earlier, that the beauty of satellite is that you can hit all four corners of the globe with 3 satellites, and broadcasters are used to accessing satellite. So I can see satellite playing a big part in what we do for for the foreseeable.
Thanks very much. We're going to close up today with some predictions, which I will hold you to this time next year, so make sure they're good. I want to know what you think 2021 will bring us as far as contribution distribution is concerned. What trend or development do you think we'll see next year? Let's start with Louisa. What's 2021 going to bring us?
Well, first of all, I really hope that fans and crowds are allowed back into the stadiums, I would say, and things are just getting a bit more back to the experience. From a broadcasting perspective, as I mentioned before, I think remote productions are going to get more important. We will have more requests of being able to work from anywhere with access to content for working there, but also to distribute it. So I think the whole flexibility, as mentioned before, is going to be a challenge, but one we have to accept and probably will come out with the better of it at the end.
Thank you very much. Nick, well, come on, let's gauge into your crystal balls. What's going to happen in 2021?
Yeah, I think, there's the remote production, which Louisa has talked about, and I think we've seen that become, something that was a project and is becoming reality in 2020. And I think that, the pandemic sort of forced more companies to implement things that they were, working on in a project environment, but have seen, the massive value that brings to them in terms of being able to do that in 2020. And I think the other thing that we're hoping to see is, I think in the last panel, Simon Harrison talked about M2A Media Connect, and we've got AWS Connect coming along and things like that. And I think seeing those expand, especially for, some of the niche sports, some of that, struggle to, to get airtime and want delivery methods. I think we'll see a lot more of that coming through those type of, internet gateway service providers. And I think if we can implement some standards and protocol, and that interoperability, or have the service providers, give operability across multiple platforms so that broadcasters don't need to think about that too much. I think that is something I see happening more in 2021 than we've seen in 2020.
Thank you very much. And last but very much not least, Larry, what's your priorities or prediction for 2021?
I'm going to be really predictable and say, obviously the remote and that continue to evolve. But one thing I guess to say around the remote production is that, I think the industry as a whole has done a, fantastic job in, shifting to remote in such a, a huge transformation under the circumstances in such a short space of time. So maybe it's time to kind of settle down when we return to a more sort of normal world a little, and then look how we can kind of move things forward and evolve.
Thank you. That's a lovely way to end. The irony that this conversation is about connectivity, and we've managed to get the whole conversation done live on Zoom. I think we should be very proud of ourselves, and well done to the platform for not falling over. More importantly, thank you very much, Louisa, Nick and Larry, for your time today. I really enjoyed that. I hope the audience have too. It was a great conversation, and we're still here. But thank you for your time, and back to you, Heather.
Another great session and a great finale to FutureSPORT. All three of our speakers there are facing a lot of challenges in 2021 for contribution and distribution, so it will be interesting to see how all that shakes out. Thank you once again to all of our chairs and speakers, our keynote speaker, Gordon Castle, and of course our wonderful sponsors, Panasonic and Limelight, and our registration sponsor, Gravity Media Group. We're not done for 2020 on events just yet, though. We've got things coming up. Coming up on the 2nd of December at 2 p.m. UK time, we have the Art of Replay live sports production workshop with EVS and SVG Europe Women, SVG Europe and SVG US, teaching the basics of how to become an LSM replay operator. It's going to be huge, as they say in New York. It's going to be a great experience, seriously, so do tell your friends.
And on the 9th of December, 3 p.m. UK time again, we have an SVG Europe technology webinar with Telstra. It's called The Winner Takes All, Unlocking the Opportunity in Esports. And it's going to provide some really interesting insights into the exciting world of competitive gaming. Please look on the SVG Europe website or your regular newsletters to register for those. One other thing, before you go, at the end of this event, you'll be directed to a feedback form. If you can spare a couple of minutes to fill it in, it will help us to continue to improve our events. Thank you in advance for doing that.
And finally, Will and I would just like to say Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, Happy Hanukkah, and a jolly Yule winter holiday to everybody.
Thank you. Till next time, take care, stay safe.
you